whilst we look at this from a generic perspective, it's also clear with Sudan, Niger, there's a lot of instability in Africa at the moment. And the Wagner Group and other mercenary outfits are becoming increasingly influential. Russian flags have been seen waving. And therefore, what role is Russia playing in that instability, particularly financial, which is less altruistic than potentially the headlines suggest?
Well, Africans are very circumspect about mercenary forces. And so, yes, Wagner is involved in 4 African countries currently, Libya, Mali, Central African Republic, and Sudan. It was notable at the summit that's just finished in St. Petersburg that the junta leader for Burkina Faso was very prominent there and being lauded by Mr. Putin. So it's clearly a case that Russia's trying to get entry into Burkina Faso. Regarding Niger, well, you can maybe help me out. It's very contradictory. So the foreign minister of Russia, Mr. Lavrov, has condemned the Niger coup, saying that there needs to be a rapid return to constitutional order. Meanwhile, on the fringes of the St. Petersburg summit, Mr. Prigozhin was very visible. And he on Telegram, has sent out a message saying that the coup in Niger was a step against colonialism, imperialism, or neocolonialism, should I say, and that the Wagner Group was ready to assist the new military junta in Niamey, the capital of Niger, if they needed support. So again, the contradictions of Russia are even playing out in kind of public diplomacy about response to a coup.
Alex, of course, it's not just Russia that has been very active in Africa over the past few years. China as well. From a Chinese perspective, would they prefer to see the African-sponsored peace initiative actually come to fruition? Or does it not rather serve their purposes in Africa if the ongoing conflict continues?
No, I think the Chinese have invested so heavily in the African continent that they wouldn't want to see contagion. They have serious oil assets, for example, production assets in Niger, and the Chinese Foreign Ministry has actually issued a very strong statement about the need to return to constitutional rule there. Actually, what I'm seeing is that China is benefiting from Russia's troubles, particularly in the area of defense. Russia is picking up more defense deals, as are other countries like Turkey. And I think this is the problem for Russia, that actually it's losing momentum in the African continent. Yes, Wagner's in 4 countries, but it's actually its footprint is shrinking. It's losing market share. And I think it must be worrying for Mr. Putin that he could only attract 17 heads of state and government to St. Petersburg last week. Just for a comparison, the UK-Africa Leaders Summit in Washington, D.C. in December last year attracted 49 heads of government and state from Africa. That's telling you something.
It certainly is. Sean, let's just get your view, though, on these. Well, in fact, there are 2 peace plans. China, of course, came up with their 12-point peace plan, which called for a ceasefire but didn't condemn the invasion, didn't oblige Russia to withdraw from occupied territories. Compare and contrast that with the African plan, as we understand it, getting rid of your tactical nukes from Belarus, the suspension, the Russian troop pullback. Also, the idea that Vladimir Putin would not be facing an ICC, an International Criminal Court arrest warrant. Now, on both of those, we're kind of asking whether or not these would be amenable to the Russians. But I'm just wondering if either of them is amenable to the Ukrainians.
Well, first of all, I think we're living in a bit of a parallel universe here. I think the whole issue of peace proposals is a bit of a sideshow. You have to remember that, exactly as Alex said, Russia's power is diminishing on the global stage. It desperately needs to maintain its allies in Africa. It absolutely needs to maintain China on side, because it's the only main export for oil and gas, in addition, obviously, to India as well. So there's a little bit of politics going around, and nodding his head sagely, saying that there's some really interesting proposals on the table. The harsh reality of this is that wars are only actually stopped when one side wins, and there's no sign that either side is on the verge of winning, or both sides get to a stalemate and they need to negotiate. And at the moment, with Ukraine on the front foot, there's no way President Zelenskyy is going to give up territory when he knows he's on the front foot. And Russia at the moment, I suspect, will, although there's probably an increasing appetite for Putin, because things are not going his way at the moment. There's a lot of discussion about whether his power base in Russia is being eroded, that actually he might not last the year out.
Well, just on that then, we were discussing this before we came into the studio, Sean. The idea that once again we have seen drone attacks on Moscow itself is, as you are describing it to me, it plays into all of that, doesn't it?
Absolutely, it does, because tactically, a drone attack in the middle of Moscow hasn't done a significant amount of damage. But just imagine that going off in central London. Just imagine the shockwaves that would emanate through the community of London if that was to happen. Without going to a history lesson, World War II, end of Pearl Harbor, America wanted to strike Japan, couldn't do it, did the Doolittle raid. They stripped out bombers, took them as close as they could, one-way missions, delivered an attack on Tokyo. Did it do any material damage? No. Did it remind Tokyo and Japan they were in a war? Absolutely it did. And when history looked back, that was a turning point in the war. So that's one of the reasons that Zelenskyy will be really keen to maintain pressure on Moscow.